What if the galaxy is full of civilizations, not silent, not extinct, but deliberately unseen? We often talk on this channel about the Great Silence as though it was some kind of cosmic threat, the growl in the dark underbrush, the cold breath on the back of your neck that makes you wonder whether something predatory is out there. But silence is not only the hallmark of the hunter. Silence can be deliberate, cultivated, and strategic. It can be the quiet of a monastery, the hush of a deep library, or the veil drawn by someone who does not wish to be seen. In our last episode, we explored the bleakest possibility, that ancient machines might have sterilized the galaxy, leaving only islands of surviving biospheres scattered throughout the Milky Way. It's a nightmare vision, a galaxy patrolled by the relics of a long-dead civilization. But if that explanation for the Fermi paradox feels like cosmic horror, today's topic is more like cosmic espionage, the idea that the galaxy may not only be full of life, but full of civilizations that have chosen not to reveal themselves, empires that have gone dark, silent, and shadowed, dwelling in places we do not think to look, cultures that exist behind the curtains of dust, ice, or clever engineering, or ones that simply let the background noise of the cosmos drown out their activities. Welcome to the second half of our duology. Last time we looked at predators, today we look at ghosts. And the strange thing is that, from the surface of Earth, both predators and ghosts give us the same result, an empty sky. Ghosts in the Galactic Night. The hidden civilization hypothesis rests on a very simple foundation. Not every species wants to be found. Some cultures may prefer introspection, privacy, or stability over expansion and contact. Others may see broadcasting their presence as inviting trouble. Still others may not want to contaminate their neighborhood with ideas or technology, or be contaminated by them from others. In fiction, we often imagine giant cloaking fields, optical shrouds, or energy screens masking entire planets. But real civilizations, if they wanted to hide, wouldn't need such dramatic effects. Space is already dark, stars already vary in brightness, and the universe is enormous beyond the grasp of instinctual imagination. A civilization that didn't want to be found could simply avoid lighting up the sky with its waste heat and infrastructure. It's only when it marches out into the galaxy, settling worlds and setting up franchises, that it become inevitably visible to civilizations like our own. And the Fermi paradox isn't about if there are alien civilizations, it's about how we can currently not see any. So the real question is not whether hiding is possible, the real question is whether hiding is plausible, sustainable, and sensible. To understand this, we need to take a step back and consider what it means for a species to spread among the stars. Exploration is in many ways a universal impulse, not necessarily for every individual or every culture, but for a species as a whole. Life expands when resources are plentiful. Intelligence expands when curiosity drives it outward. Even civilizations that prefer stability or isolation may eventually produce factions that want to explore, experiment, or break away. That is the very essence of cultural diversity, and that desire to wander and expand should be very common, as it has clear evolutionary advantages. That does not mean it is universal. Sibling cannibalism has clear advantages too, and a technological civilization should be experienced in resisting natural impulses when wiser heads suggest better paths. But, by and large, growth and expansion seem generally advantageous, so we would expect it by default. We'll discuss why that might not always be true later. Way back in our Hidden Aliens episode, during the deep speech impediment era, we touched on the paradox of a civilization trying to silence every member of its society for all time, a strategy that falls apart the moment someone decides they'd rather see what lies beyond the horizon. There is no universal muzzle that works on billions of minds for millions of years. Even strict regimes on Earth have never perfectly controlled communications or dissent, and that's on a single planet, speaking a single language with one shared history. Now try that across dozens of worlds, trillions of citizens, and centuries of divergent evolution and culture. Hiding may be tempting, but it's hard to imagine it being permanent. Yet people often imagine the galaxy as it was a single conversation between two civilizations. Either everyone is loud or everyone is quiet, but the Milky Way is not a meeting hall, it's more like a jungle, a coral reef, a desert, and an ocean all rolled together, full of niches and habitats where different strategies flourish for different timescales. Some species might shout their presence from the stars, others may whisper only to their own descendants, and some may go dark entirely, floating inward into realms we might only discover if we stumbled into them by accident. One common idea is that advanced civilizations might hide inside megastructures that emit minimal waste heat. They might live in vast cold habitats orbiting far from starlight, where their energy use is minimized and their signals blend into the cosmic microwave background. Others might migrate to rogue planets, drifting between the stars in perfect darkness, with no stellar emissions to give them away. Still others might build empires inside thick clouds of interstellar dust, where telescopes cannot easily see. These are not magical cloaks, they're simply clever use of the environment. If you wanted to avoid detection, you wouldn't build a blazing Dyson sphere, pulsing in infrared wavelengths. You'd build cold worlds, faint worlds, habitats with near-perfect energy recycling, and you place them where no one's likely to look. But keep in mind the opportunity cost. A civilization on a rogue planet would be lucky to hide a trillion-watt power supply blended into the entire planet. Honestly, even a gigawatt might be dubious, to keep them hidden from the predator. That's all their meager energy supply to combat off a civilization hunting them with what might be K2 or higher, with access to trillions of times as much energy and the freedom to wield it. Given a choice of which civilization I'd want to be, give me that Cartership 2 Dyson swarm, not the rebels living in an icy moon in the interstellar wilderness. I can devote 1,000,000 times their industrial capacity just to building fleets and probes to hunt them down, and count the whole expenditure as a rounding error in my civilization's massive economy. And I don't have to be successful in finding them every time. My civilization keeps going on. I only have to find them once, and theirs then does not. The long defeat of secrecy. Shadows cannot endure forever. I feel like at some point any civilization that is hiding is going to ask why the planet they live on, which is obviously visible to any civilization big enough and old enough to threaten them, represents a safe place. So either grow yourself big to fight the threat or migrate elsewhere. Mind you, any strategy, no matter how satisfying, should only be judged and enacted based on its probability of success. Growing big from a planet into some interstellar empire covering a few hundred worlds sounds awesome, but if that's all the time you have to grow before some billion-year-old galactic predator's jaws clamp down on your throat, well, it feels good, but still a futile gesture. On the matter of migration, there's also the possibility of civilizations using asteroid belts or orc clouds as camouflage. Maybe you wreck your planet, which you might already have a head start on through technological progress and industrialization anyway, and leave signs and signals you murder yourselves off. You quietly migrate elsewhere, or maybe your fledgling asteroid and moon cases were all that survived the grey goo or targeted viruses, murder bots, and nuclear annihilation. You didn't really aim for silence, you just rebuilt civilization from the ashes of empire and its quiet border outposts. Let us imagine an alien empire that never builds a visible space station or orbital ring, but instead hollows out small icy bodies, turning millions of scattered asteroids and comets into habitats with no obvious thermal signatures. To us, that would look like normal clouds of primordial debris. We would never suspect that inside those frozen shells are thriving societies, each one the size of a city, collectively forming a distributed empire far larger than a single planet could host. The trouble is, every one of those hiding strategies runs headlong into the same problem we discussed in our Berserker episode: time. Strategies that work for a century may not work for 1,000. Strategies that work for 1,000 crack under the strain of 1,000,000. Civilizations are not static, their circumstances, cultures, technologies, and goals evolve. Isolationist periods come and go. Empires rise and fall. Reasonable caution can turn to paranoia and back into reckless exuberance, and cycle through that hundreds of times in a galactic eye blink. Even if the original founding generation wants secrecy, future generations may not, and even if they do, internal factions will not be aligned forever. Forget the core logic of the strategy. We should not even expect machine minds to be terribly wedded to solid logic, but the logic does not add up to encourage hiding anyway. Moreover, both civilian leaders and generals are noted for their ambition. It's not a group of people you'd expect to decide to hide, even if it sounded viable. Go into the Pentagon or a G7 meeting and suggest we camouflage our entire civilization no matter the economic cost. Pull that off and at least consider the possibility many civilizations tried that option, but that all of them did and did forever? No, I just can't see that. The same applies to Prime Directive or Zoo Hypothesis scenarios for Earth, by aliens, and is why I tend to assume alien intelligence is just rare, because I can't imagine such plans being considered viable in the long term. It is also a situation they need to decide early on, definitely before spreading to the stars and preferably before inventing radio. Not that you need a radio signal from a planet to realize it's life-bearing or even holds intelligence. In fact, the larger and more distributed a civilization becomes, the harder it is to maintain a coherent policy at all. A solitary world might hide successfully. A single Dyson swarm might coordinate its missions, send tailored laser beams out to hit every world they thought might hold intelligence, faking a normal star's signature. But the moment you expand to dozens or hundreds of systems, you inherit the same problem empires have always faced: distance, breakaways, subcultures, and outright separatists. Not to mention lunatics. And in space, separatism isn't just ideological, it can be ecological. A population living in a 1G O'Neill cylinder may come to see themselves as entirely different people from their cousins in microgravity hives around a cold brown dwarf. Heck, they might blow the whistle on the main civilization just to flick them the bird before the invasion fleet from the homeworld arrived to get them. Hey galaxy, here's a meaty prize, come take a bite. If your homeworld's about to take you out, let the galaxy burn is not a bad approach to revenge. All it takes is one such faction deciding that hiding is cowardice or stagnation, or a violation of their cultural destiny, or just a moment of spite, and suddenly your quiet civilization has a beacon on the galactic stage, and once even one member of a civilization gives off a detectable signature, hiding ceases to be a species-wide behavior. It becomes a local preference, one that can be overridden by others. Now imagine you're the oligarchy of wise aliens ruling your civilization, and someone suggests hiding at great cost, and your general comes in and points all this out to you. Do you believe everyone there, and at every other alien homeworld ruling council or councils, will vote for silence? Or will they agree with the general who says, plow our resources into expansion, let's build industry, new homes, and new armadas, and giant cannons, and at the very least if they do come, we'll make them regret it. If they burn our world, we'll see 1 billion of them feed our funeral pyre too. Which would you prefer? The fragility of eternal silence. There's also the issue of visibility over deep time. Earth's biosphere has been visible from light years away for 1 billion years. Oxygen atmospheres produce a spectral signature you cannot hide unless you literally dismantle your biosphere. Chlorophyll has painted our world green for 500 million. Ocean glint reflects starlight tens of thousands of times brighter than our radio emissions. Even assuming an advanced alien civilization wanted to hide an Earth-like world, doing so would require technology indistinguishable from magic, clock tech, and hiding 100 such worlds, 1,000, beggars belief. It is far more realistic to assume that hidden civilizations are not hiding planets but hiding habitats, not suppressing their biological nature but suppressing their technological signatures. A shadow civilization does not need to mask a biosphere, it only needs to mask its activities, and that is much easier. Habitat worlds made of ice, carbon, or darkened metal can't be cold enough to blend in with the cosmic background. Reactor waste can be radiated slowly. Data can be transmitted through tight beam lasers that never sweep across Earth. Fleet maneuvers can be conducted under dense dust cover. The galaxy may not be empty, it may just be polite. But this polite universe still has a problem. Hiding carries its own strategic weaknesses. As we'll see, concealing a civilization over deep time may be harder than surviving a war. And the real Fermi paradox may lie in the tension between surviving danger and surviving silence. If a galaxy full of quiet civilization sounds peaceful, it's worth remembering that silence is not the same thing as safety. A society that hides must maintain two things at all times: control and consensus. It must prevent internal dissent, and it must keep its technological footprint below whatever threshold it believes will attract attention. That's quite manageable for a temporary emergency, a century-long lockdown perhaps, or a few thousand years in the aftermath of a supernova, or while waiting out a hostile neighbor. But over millions of years, the cracks inevitably form. One problem is the children. Every new generation inherits the consequences of decisions they did not make. They might tolerate secrecy for a while, but eventually someone asks, why exactly are we doing this? That question has been the bane of every empire, every regime, and every religious order on Earth. A policy that begins as necessary or reasonable can ossify into dogma, and that dogma eventually becomes brittle. Even if your initial motives are noble, a desire not to contaminate other species, a wish to avoid triggering a dangerous neighbor, you can't expect every descendant to see things the same way. Some will be curious, some will be rebellious, some will see hiding as cowardice or stagnation. Some will believe it's all a lie, some will simply get bored and decide they want to know what's on the other side of the cosmic fence. Imagine trying to keep an entire species quiet for 10,000 generations. Honestly, I can't even imagine doing it for one. Someone, somewhere is going to build a telescope they are not supposed to, or launch a probe someone said was forbidden, or send a tight beam signal just to see if anyone replies. And that's for a single world. Now imagine a dozen worlds, or 100, or a distributed civilization living in millions of independent, rotating habitats scattered throughout interstellar space. Every habitat is a political experiment. Every world is a new culture. At some point, one of them is going to break ranks. Even worse, the act of hiding becomes vulnerability. If a shadow civilization believes the galaxy contains predators, whether berserkers or something more subtle, then refusing to expand or reveal themselves does not eliminate the danger, it merely postpones it. A species that never spreads to other systems has no redundancy. One catastrophe, natural engineered, could wipe them out. The evolutionary truth is that survival belongs to the adaptable, the distributed, and the mobile. Hiding tends to oppose all three. A truly cautious civilization would do the opposite, expand aggressively while remaining tactically quiet. They would seed distant star systems with self-repairing backups, archiving their knowledge in distributed networks, fortify their industrial base, and scatter their population across millions of refuges. You cannot go extinct if extinction requires chasing down millions of separated, independent nodes scattered through every dark gravitational nook in the galaxy. That resilience requires growth, not secrecy. Some might say, fine, then just hide while expanding, but expansion itself generates detectable signatures. Even if you're careful, you leave altered asteroid belts in your wake. You create artificial orbits of debris around stars. You change the spectral properties of systems you develop. You alter the gravitational harmonics of planets you mine. You leave behind dust plumes, thermal gradients, and industrial gas signatures. Nature is wonderfully chaotic, but it isn't infinitely patient. A civilization carving out a living space on a galactic scale leaves traces of its effort, even if it's subtle. And subtle is enough. Remember, you're only trying to hide because you think there's somebody out there who is determined enough to spend millions of years constantly and fanatically hunting out any other signs of life and squishing it like a bug. This is a reality. The very nature of intelligence is that it alters its environment to benefit it. If it did not, then intelligence would serve no purpose, and by doing so, those changes leave telltales others can see for what they are. Intelligence recognizes intelligence. Now, if you are a channel regular, you have heard me give some of these thoughts before. I am quite intentionally redoing and updating a lot of our earlier episodes, the ones from the so-called deep speech impediment era with, let's say, less production quality, whenever I think a refresh is warranted. I like to think my writing, visuals, and audio are all much better now. Usually when I talk about hiding, I make the case that math and physics just don't allow it. There is no stealth in space. This episode was written the same 2-day stretch as the Berserker episode and our Void Fleet episode, and that no stealth argument is something I've discussed many times. Some folks nod and agree, and many others remain unconvinced, because we never really know what new technology might get invented tomorrow that breaks some bit of physics we thought was nailed down. Fair enough. Civilizations break thermodynamics or dump heat energy into black holes or exist in pocket universes of folded and invisible spacetime. I'm honestly more optimistic about any of those options than actual FTL. So this time, instead of leaning on physics, I leaned heavily on the logic. But just to restate the basic physical argument, any action or work you do inevitably produces heat. That's the laws of thermodynamics, and really the very definition of work. And that heat leaks out for others to see, if they know how to look. Instead, our focus today was the reminder that anything intelligence does to alter the natural world leaves a mark. And if intelligence refuses to leave any mark at all, then it has no purpose for existing in the first place. I find that a compelling case, but tell me in the comments below if you disagree. A key point today is that aliens wouldn't likely hide because it isn't logical, and people are likely to object. But history shows us plenty of examples of leaders who were not logical and who people feared to object to anything they commanded. If you want a modern echo of that theme, check out real-life lore's Mad Kings on Nebula, an original documentary series about unstable rulers and the machinery of power around them, told with a level of frankness that's hard to keep intact on YouTube. Right now, Nebula's running a huge discount. With my link or the QR code on the screen, you get 50% off a yearly plan. just $30 for the whole year, about $250 a month, and new members get a 3-day free trial, so you can check out Mad Kings or this month's SFA exclusive, Chrono Engineering, for free. Head to go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur and start watching today. Shadows Between the Stars. Yet there remains a compelling version of the Hidden Empire scenario, one where civilizations do not hide forever but cycle between loud and quiet phases. In their youth they expand and explore, building bright beacons and megastructures. Later they may retreat in quieter forms of existence, virtual societies, cold-running habitats, or deliberately austere ways of life. From Earth's perspective, we might simply be living during a quiet epoch, a somber intermission between eras of cosmic noise. The Milky Way could be a library full of brilliant books whose readers have stepped outside for a moment. If this idea feels reassuring, well, there's a catch. Civilizations that intentionally dim themselves over time may do so because they've learned dangerous lessons from their own histories. Perhaps they experienced technological crises, AI misfires, or interstellar tensions that convince them to pursue quieter forms of existence. A galaxy of silent neighbors might not mean we are alone. It might mean they discovered pitfalls we have not yet reached. I would also invite you to imagine what it would really look like for a civilization to voluntarily turn down its lights. For me, that seems more like a Silencing of the Five Families from Godfather, with powerful elements of the civilization snuffing out the candles of their peers. As I said a moment ago, though, one of the strongest arguments against long-term concealment is energy itself. A fully developed civilization uses enormous amounts of power, regardless of whether that power comes from stars, fusion, black holes, or exotic technologies we haven't invented yet. All that energy must eventually produce waste heat. You can slow down how you radiate it, or bury it deep inside supercooled structures, or radiate it anisotropically so it doesn't point at Earth. But you cannot make it disappear. A galaxy with a truly vast population of advanced civilizations, all hiding perfectly, would have a different thermal profile than what we observe. Not dramatically different, but different enough that astronomers would have raised eyebrows. Instead, the Milky Way's infrared and microwave emissions look decidedly ordinary. But this does not rule out isolated pockets of hidden activity. Rogue planets drifting through interstellar night could host civilizations whose heat signatures blended almost perfectly into the background. Large artificial bodies and Oort clouds of distant stars would be almost impossible to detect. Hollowed-out comets tumbling freely through the void would appear indistinguishable from their natural population, and deep inside molecular clouds, regions already opaque to our telescopes, entire super-civilizations could reside without our ever knowing. These are not scenarios where the entire galaxy hides. These are scenarios where individual civilizations find shadows and simply settle into them. And this raises an unsettling possibility. Perhaps we call the Great Silence not the silence of absence or the silence imposed by predators, but the silence of irrelevance. Maybe we are too primitive, too noisy, or too biologically chaotic for older civilizations to engage with. Perhaps we're being ignored not out of malice or caution, but because our wavelength of existence does not overlap with theirs. A pre-industrial culture cannot meaningfully communicate with a post-singularity one. The speed, scale, and form of existence may simply be too different. Or perhaps the irrelevance is theirs. They surrendered it to cower in the cold shadows between stars. But other options could exist. Some have suggested that shadowed civilizations might deliberately maintain regions like ours as untouched reserves, a kind of cosmic anthropology project where primitive civilizations like ours are allowed to develop without interference. If so, the silence is not a threat but a choice, one that could last until we reach a threshold where interaction becomes appropriate. From our vantage point, that looks like indifference. From theirs, it might be stewardship. Yet even this noble-seeming idea has its own fault lines. Civilizations differ. Not all share the same ethics. Even among humans, consensus about stewardship is fragile. If one civilization believes in letting developing species grow naturally, another might take a more interventionist approach. A third may not care at all. A fourth might regard emerging species as potential competition. Maintaining a perfectly uniform, hands-off approach across multiple alien empires seems implausible. Over deep time, someone, somewhere, would break the rule. Which means that even in a galaxy full of hidden or cautious societies, the fundamental pressures of evolution, curiosity, fear, pride, rivalry, boredom, and ambition still exist. Silence cannot eliminate them, it can only muffle them for a while. And the idea of shadow civilizations remains compelling because it offers a quieter kind of cosmic mystery. Not a galaxy purified by machine predators, but one where ancient empires dimmed their own lights and withdrew into the cool, quiet margins of the cosmos. Their ruins might be out there, Their archives might drift between the stars. Their descendants may sit inside court habitats, listening to universe like monks in a cloister. And for all we know, we might already be brushing up against the edges of their territory without even realizing it. If hidden civilizations exist, not just one, but hundreds, maybe thousands, then the Milky Way would be a far more complicated place than any tidy Fermi paradox chart can capture. It would be a galaxy full of territorial lines no one can see, cultural boundaries carved in infrared, and spheres of influence marked by nothing more obvious than subtle adjustments in dust clouds or gravitational architecture. We might look at an ordinary patch of the sky and think it empty, while an older civilization sees it the way a sailor sees a coastline, full of reefs and shifting currents. But there's a reason I think of this hypothesis as the second half of the duology. Just like we did with the Berserker scenario, we'd ask whether this strategy can really hold up over deep time, and the answer again is that it works beautifully for a while, until it fails catastrophically. The most obvious failure mode is the same one that plagued every empire in human history: information leakage. Once a civilization discovers fire, sails, radio, antimatter, nukes, or wormholes, it's only a matter of time till someone somewhere uses those tools in a way that reveals their presence. A hidden empire might keep its core under a cloak of silence, but outlying colonies will drift, breakaway groups will arise, dissidents will transmit, refugees may flee, even accidents will happen. A misaligned reactor, a mining explosion, or a runaway probe could all create signatures impossible to hide. Then there is simple curiosity, the urge to explore the forbidden horizon. A civilization that suppresses every brave or rebellious impulse can only do so by breaking its own spirit. A people who do not allow themselves to wonder cease to be a civilization. They become a caretaker machine for the ghosts of their ancestors' feats and fears. And even if the original generation's fears were justified, their descendants may not share them. A silent empire is slowly outvoted by its own children. Even if only one such group decides to emerge from the shadows, the entire cover is blown for the rest. Galactic secrecy is not a strategy that scales. It is a delicate truce maintained by billions of independent wills. There is also the question of necessity. Why hide forever? If danger is the motivation, then danger will eventually force adaptation. If predators roam the galaxy, you either learn to fight them or outrun them. If your neighbors are unstable, you either build coalitions or fortifications. If your fear is contamination, you adopt clear boundaries and protocols. None of these require infinite secrecy. They require power, not silence. If your enemy is so mighty and so determined that they will hunt you for eons, why hide? They will find you. You only need to succeed once. You only need to fail once. And yet, the allure of the hidden empire remains, because it offers us something the Berserker hypothesis never can: the possibility that the galaxy is full of life and thought, and that we simply haven't reached the point where we become interesting to them. Perhaps civilizations go quiet not because they are afraid, because they are focused inward, exploring virtual universes, or delving into sciences beyond our comprehension. Maybe they do not hide to survive, maybe they hide because they can afford to. There's a version of this idea I find particularly compelling: the dimmed civilization. These are societies that once lit up their stars with megastructures, sent probes across thousands of light years, and carved their names into nebulae, but have since slowed down. Their ambitions became refined, their expansion calmed, their needs minimized. They learned to run cold and quiet not as a necessity but as an aesthetic. For them, the galaxy is old and settled. Their light has grown softer, their footprints lighter. To us, they would look like shadows, only because their day in the bright sun of cosmic history has already passed. All these ideas, hidden worlds, quiet empires, scattered court habitats, paint the Milky Way as a place with depth, mystery, and complexity, but they also bring us back to the central question: if so many civilizations hide, why don't we see even one of them that chose differently? The real paradox is not that everyone might hide. The paradox is not a single civilization seems to have stepped into the open. Not a lone rebel, not a curious species, not a single philosophical sect devoted to shining their presence into the void. This suggests something profound. Either hidden civilizations are incredibly rare, or hiding is a temporary behavior in a much longer cosmic history. Silence may be just one chapter in the life cycle of intelligent species, not the final state. Which brings us to humanity, a civilization not yet old enough to know the rules of the galactic game, but old enough to guess at some of them. From our perspective, the galaxy is silent, but that silence does not need to be ominous. It might simply be the deep breath before the conversation begins. We may be like a young species stepping into an ancient forest, our lantern newly lit, unaware of all the eyes watching from the trees. Some of those eyes may belong to predators, some to fellow travelers, some to quiet contemplators who prefer the solitude of starlight. Regardless, our future is not shaped by their silence, it is shaped by our choices. If the galaxy is full of hidden empires, then we will eventually meet them, not by accident, but because we will grow large enough, bright enough, and confident enough to make our presence known. Humanity's destiny has never been to cower in the dark. It has always been to explore, to build, to reach out, and to thrive. Silence, whether imposed by predators or adopted by hermits, is not the natural state of life. Life strives, it experiments, it wanders, and eventually it speaks. If the galaxy is full of shadow civilizations, then someday we will join their ranks, not as frightened newcomers, but as equals who will bring our own stories to the long, quiet conversation of the stars. And if the galaxy is empty, then the silence is simply our invitation to fill it.